Generating traffic and sales can be a challenge for online merchants. But selling on the Walmart Marketplace puts your products in front of millions of customers who shop on Walmart.com. And right now, sellers who join Walmart Marketplace can save up to 50% on referral and fulfillment fees for the first 90 days. So get started today. Head over to marketplace.walmart.com/savings. That's marketplace.walmart.com/savings.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Nextopia, site search that increases sales. Visit nextopia.com/podcast to learn more. Welcome to E-Commerce Conversations, a weekly podcast focusing on e-commerce topics featuring interviews with prominent people in the e-commerce space.
Welcome to E-Commerce Conversations by Practical E-Commerce. My name is Kerry Murdock. Most every e-commerce merchant deals with web hosting to some degree. But web hosting is rapidly evolving, and to help us understand both the current landscape and possible future developments, we're joined today by John Engates, Chief Technology Officer of Rackspace Hosting in San Antonio. Rackspace is a preeminent hosting company. It was started in a garage in 1996 as mainly a design firm. It is now a publicly traded hosting giant with offices around the globe and with 2008 annual sales approximating $500 million. Mr. Engates manages the technology behind all of this, and we're pleased to have him join us. Well, John, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Kerry.
John, for the small business owner, what will the hosting landscape be in 5 years, say? What's going to change for them?
Well, I think that the technology trends in our industry are constantly changing. Things are never static within the hosting landscape. I think in terms of what it'll mean to small businesses, I think it's going to be more accessible. The emergence of virtualization and cloud computing are making access to technology more accessible. The entry points, the cost of getting in to an entry-level e-commerce infrastructure is going to become dramatically less expensive. Things like hosting platforms that are multi-tenant and shared and able to support lots of customers at a lower price point makes it easier for companies to get started. At the same time, there are new regulations in place for things like the payment card industry, PCI compliance, that actually have made it a little harder for companies to get into this with sort of an entry level budget. I think one of the nice things about working with a company in a hosting company like Rackspace is we can bring you the technology and help you with the compliance, and I would encourage anybody that's sort of thinking about getting into e-commerce, especially small companies, to work with somebody else to do that. Don't try to do everything yourself. Look for an expert, look for a specialist, and I think that in the next 5 years it will certainly be different. Cloud computing is changing the landscape in a big way. I can't predict the future to the sort of the crystal ball level, but I think that we'll see a lot of new options, new ways to break into the market, new technologies, and new players, new vendors coming to the marketplace. I think the biggest surprise has been the fact that Amazon has been a new player in infrastructure. They've traditionally always been around as an e-commerce retailer and an e-commerce enabler for companies. And now they're really getting into infrastructure, and that's sort of changing the landscape in terms of the competitors. And we'll see a lot of competition. It'll drive the costs down and hopefully make it better for the consumer. You
mentioned cloud computing there, John. I know that your firm, Rackspace, has purchased two cloud computing companies, Jungle Disk and SliceHost. Tell us what is cloud computing.
Well, cloud computing is the buzzword that describes the way to deliver IT infrastructure as a service with a utility pricing model. I think there was a term thrown around a few years back called utility computing, and what that term meant to most people was I can buy computing services and pay for them as I need them. I can buy servers or storage or whatever types of infrastructure services I need, and I don't have to commit long-term for those services. I can buy them for a short period of time. I can buy them for a day or a week or a month, and I don't pay for services or the overhead that I'm not using. So when my demand is high, I pay for more services, and when my demand decreases, I pay for less. And this is particularly important, I think, for e-commerce companies, because a lot of e-commerce companies have seasonality in their business. During the time between Thanksgiving and New Year's, it's usually the high season for e-commerce retailers, those types of folks. And so they want infrastructure to ramp up during that time period, and they want it to scale back down so they don't have to pay for it during sort of the off-peak seasons. And I think finally with cloud computing, we're starting to be able to deliver on the promises of this utility-based pricing model and utility-based infrastructure services that people are going to need to power their e-commerce businesses. I guess some practical examples of cloud computing. We acquired one company recently called SliceHost. SliceHost is a company that provides virtual servers as a service. So pay for a virtual machine on a physical server, and you pay for it by the month. No contracts, no commitments. Pay by the month. One of the things that Rackspace is doing since the acquisition is actually taking that a step further and moving to a pay by the hour fee for servers. So for companies that have even trends that happen intraday, if they have a daily spike and in the afternoon or the evening they taper off, now you're going to be able to buy those computing services, by the hour and pay for them and scale them up and scale them down. The other company that we acquired was a company called Jungle Disk. And Jungle Disk is essentially a software company that built a tool for backing up your laptop or your desktop to the cloud. And cloud storage is an emerging area for really every kind of business, but I guess e-commerce, in terms of what they would use sort of cloud storage for, backup is obviously one thing for their small business. They have desktops, they have laptops that are mobile. They want to keep those things backed up. Backing up to the internet and to the cloud is sort of an obvious way to do that, low cost and without a whole lot of overhead and management. Another use for cloud storage is storing your digital assets in the cloud. For example, most e-commerce sites have a ton of images and content and data that they want to store somewhere, and they want to serve that up via the web. And the cloud storage platform that we've built allows you to store all of those digital assets, your images and your video files and your content. You can store it in the cloud for very low cost, and then you can also serve it directly out of the cloud so that you don't have to build up that infrastructure. The cloud has that infrastructure available, so you can serve files directly and even through a content delivery network directly out of the cloud. So those two companies that we acquired have helped us sort of bring some new cloud capabilities to the market, and they've sort of rounded out our service capabilities.
I know, John, software as a service is a growing trend. How will this affect smaller businesses, do you think? And certainly I would think it would affect hosting arrangements if they're buying the entire service software.
Well, software as a service is certainly a growing trend. We see it, one of the most popular is the Salesforce.com. They have an offering for companies to take advantage of to run their Salesforce. That's just sort of one software as a service example. I think one that Rackspace has brought to market is email as a service. I think a lot of small companies need email services and collaboration services, and they don't want to build up the infrastructure to run that themselves, but they do want sort of a full-featured enterprise class offering, something that's mission critical to them. The email, they want to be up and running all the time. They have customers that want to interact with them from a customer service standpoint. So they don't want to use free email. They don't want to use something that has no SLA and no support around it. So we've brought an offering to the market in the email space with SaaS, and we call it MailTrust. MailTrust is our email brand, and MailTrust is actually starting to shape up to be more than just email. We're, the Jungle Disk that we just talked about is another software as a service offering for backups. We also see the opportunity for customers to use things like Microsoft SharePoint services for collaboration, things like that. But SaaS is becoming a bigger and bigger piece of the IT landscape, because people, in business don't want to mess with IT. They just want something that works, something that somebody else manages and takes care of. And I think for key elements of the business, SaaS is very much prime, ready for production use. I think there are other aspects of the business that I would say, SaaS isn't really quite ready for prime time. So we think email is prime. We think that backup to the cloud is prime. We think that things like Salesforce.com, but there are things that you might still consider, and I would encourage every company to take a look at your IT needs, all your requirements, and then see how that maps into the available offerings out there. SaaS can take care of quite a bit of it today, and I would imagine that over time that will even expand. Rackspace hosts a lot of SaaS companies. We're a infrastructure provider to a great number of them, and so we really hope SaaS does succeed. We see it as a great way to sort of offload some of your IT burden to somebody else.
Rackspace is a public company now, of course. It was launched back in '96. The success has been amazing. Could you give us a little overview on the company now, John? How big is it? How many customers, servers, how many countries you serve? I think you're pretty much all over the globe, but give us an idea of how big it is now.
We've been around for over 10 years. I think the company launched as a sort of a startup back in the 90s, and during the 2000s is really when we grew fast. We're publicly traded today. Our symbol is RAX. And I think we probably have about 15,000 customers under our traditional hosting umbrella. We have probably over 45 or 50,000 servers under management. We host servers in 8 data centers around the globe. The servers are located, we have two data centers in San Antonio, one in Dallas, one up in Herndon, Virginia, which is right outside of Washington, D.C. We have a few in London, the UK, and then we have one new one in Hong Kong. So we certainly have a worldwide footprint at this point. We have customers in probably over 100 countries. There really is no restriction on where where you can be a customer. You can be a customer anywhere. Your servers just have to reside in one of our 8 data centers. And so for companies and customers that want to serve a particular market, they just put their servers in that market. So for the U.S. and the UK and Hong Kong, you just want to make sure you're close to your customers. We're probably pretty close to 2,500 employees today. But Rackspace, I think, is pretty well positioned in the middle, where you're small enough to really get things done and big enough to have the wherewithal to do them. Being the public company helped us with a big infusion of capital. We were able to do those acquisitions that we wanted to do, and we were pretty well set up for the tough economic climate that we seem to be in today. And we've been profitable for a lot of years, so no real worries about our economic future, but it's certainly going to be tough for everybody.
Anything else on your mind today for our listeners?
Sure. I think when we think about e-commerce, we think of customer service. I think our Rackspace, we're the home of fanatical support. Our mission at Rackspace is to provide the world's greatest service experience to our customers, and we think that the infrastructure and the people that you rely on are a part of your platform that you're going to deliver to your customers, and you want somebody backing you up that offers the same level of service or better than you are. So I think Rackspace is certainly well positioned to serve e-commerce. We've been doing it for many years, and we would love to see how we can help people out.
John Engates, the Chief Technology Officer of Rackspace Hosting. We want to thank you for your time today, sir.
Thank you very much, Kerry.
That's all the time we have for this week's e-commerce conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. Please tune in next week for another new episode.